In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Our Lady, seat of wisdom,
Pray for us.
St. Peter,
Pray for us.
St. Thomas Aquinas,
Pray for us.
St. Benedict,
Pray for
in the name of
us.
the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Okay. So last week we had looked at 4 objections. We'll have a quick little look at the 5th objection today. We finished yesterday with, we looked at 3 objections yesterday, and then last week, and I mentioned the 4th objection. What about all those intellectual, brilliant unbelievers, the counter-examples to Justin Martin? If Christianity was so reasonable, why didn't it list a whole lot of people who were non-believers but were well-known people? So Celsus, Plotinus, Hobbes, Machiavelli, Voltaire, Rousseau, Melville, Jefferson, Shaw, Russell, Franklin, Sartre, Camus, Nietzsche, Marx, Freud and Skinner all reject Christianity. And the reply was, Christianity is reasonable but it is not obvious. It's more like E equals MC squared and 2 plus 2 equals 4. But if Christianity is so irrational, why have so many brilliant minds accepted it? And then he lists a whole lot of them. St. Paul, St. John, St. Augustine, St. Aquinas, St. Anselm, St. Bonaventure, Blessed Duns, Scotus, Descartes, Pascal, Leibniz, Berkeley, Galileo, Copernicus, on and on and on and on. And then great Dostoevsky, Tolkien, Solzhenitsyn, Michelangelo, Da Vinci, T.S. Eliot, etc. Okay, and then comes to objection 5. But aren't Christians' reasons really rationalizations? Aquinas didn't really arrive at the existence of God by means of the reasoning in his 5 proofs. He learned it from his mother. So it's starting from that point. Well, obviously, as all children do in Christian lands. Then, as an adult, he looked for some reasons to confirm the faith he already adopted for non-logical reasons. That's not reasoning, but rationalization. So the reply, the first one says, even if that were all Aquinas did, it would not invalidate his proofs, okay, because his proofs stand in and of themselves, regardless of what went before them. An irrational subjective motive does not necessarily mean an irrational objective argument. So even if one was led to something by what would be, as an atheist, that's an irrational reason for doing something, it still doesn't make his argument irrational. Okay, his argument is still very watertight. Suppose Einstein had discovered that E equals MC squared because he was a Nazi who wanted to invent the atom bomb to conquer the Allies and win the war for Hitler. That bad motive does not mean that E does not equal MC squared. Okay? The objection commits the genetic fallacy, confusing the psychological origin of an idea with its logical validity. So the validity in Thomas's arguments are not made invalid because of any other idea about his upbringing. And the second reply is, looking for good reasons for your faith can be perfectly honest if you are also open to reasons against it, as Aquinas certainly was. The objections against the many doctrines he defends in the Summa are manifold, fairly stated and objectively answered. And the third reply is, although Aquinas first learned about God by faith, Aristotle did not. So you know Aristotle, the Greek philosopher from 500 BC, obviously before Christ, and as a Greek, he had no knowledge of Hebrew religion. Aristotle knew nothing of the scriptures, but much about God. History proves that human reason, unaided by faith and divine revelation, can come to know the existence and some of the attributes of God. And this is what Aristotle was so great at with, for example, that he is one, that he is eternal, that he is perfect, that he is intelligent, and that he is the uncaused cause. Aristotle did just that. His reasoning was not rationalizing for he had no faith to rationalize, except his faith in reason itself. And Aristotle was considered probably the greatest mind of the ancient world. Revelation takes us for an easy ride up the mountain of truth in a divinely provided helicopter. Reason struggles and scrambles up the hard, slow footpath, and it doesn't get nearly as far up. Neither way invalidates the other. Millions can get to the top in a helicopter, while only a few Aristotles can get more than a few feet up the path by walking. Okay, because very few people can match the brilliance of Aristotle in his logic, and even just in his brilliance as a human. Okay, so that was objection 5, saying that Aquinas came to his reasons, that they were not reasons, they were just rationalizations of what he already believed. Objection number 6, doesn't reason take away the merit of faith? There is nothing praiseworthy in believing something because you see it. Make sense? You already see it? That doesn't mean anything if you believe it because you already see it, whether with your eyes or with your mind. But it is praiseworthy to trust a friend. To prove what you believe removes your merit or praiseworthiness in believing it, so it was not advantageous. I don't really think it's a great objection, but the answer is that since we're supposed to grow up and figure things out for ourselves, understanding and proving our faith is praiseworthy. Our parents don't want us to remain children who don't understand them, but can only trust them, nor do they want us to stop trusting them. What is praiseworthy is obeying God's will, including his will for us to grow up. All right, so in conclusion to this first chapter on faith and reason, I'll read the postscript before we go into part 2, which is on God, which is what I'm going to cover tonight. There is a far harder task than the one this chapter has dealt with. This chapter showed that there can never be any real contradiction between faith and reason, between Christian revelation and true philosophy or true science. It was about the task of being both a full Christian and a full philosopher or a scientist. That task is easy. What is harder and more precious is to be a Christian philosopher or a Christian scientist. The greatness of giants like Augustine and Aquinas was not merely that they solved problems and resolved apparent contradictions between faith and reason, Christianity and philosophy, but that they married them, united them, permeated their philosophy with the light of faith. So how do you do that? It takes more than a chapter in a book to say so. Read them and see. You'll learn more about what a good marriage is by living in one than by reading all the books in the world. The same is true of the marriage between faith and reason. Through the magic of books, the masters converse with us. We are invited to come and see. Okay, so the best way to become a good student and become a good teacher of Christian apologetics is to go to the masters who taught it and sit at their feet. Right? So we're going to start now on 20 arguments for the existence of God. Quite long ones. Well, there's a lot to them, and they take up quite a bit of this book. Chapter 3. So 40 pages of this book on the 20 arguments for the existence of God. So, so the way that these are going to be organised, they're organised into 2 basic groups. Those which take their data from without. Okay. These are called Cosmological arguments is your new word for today. Cosmological arguments. And secondly, those that take their data from within. Psychological arguments. The group of cosmological arguments. The data is taken from without, no, it's not within the person, it's from outside, from the cosmos. Begin with our versions, or with the versions that the book is picking up of St. Thomas Aquinas' 5 ways for the proof of God. The 5 ways are those that he takes from outside. These are not the simplest of arguments, because they are Aquinas unloading his brain upon us, and therefore are not the most convincing to many people. The order is not from the most to the least effective. The first argument in particular is quite difficult because it is an abstract argument, which is that's something Aquinas leans to, and you've seen that over the last few weeks. The abstract ideas are part of what St. Thomas does use quite a bit of. Okay, so and not all the arguments are equally demonstrative. So we'll work through them. All right, so the first one of these, I'm going to rub that off so I can start with the argument number 1 and take a bit of the board with that. The first of the arguments is one of St. Thomas's 5 ways for the proof of God, the argument from change. Okay? Number 1 of 20. So the material world that we know is a world of change. The great kauri tree grew from a small seed. Okay? Constant change. Change from a seed to a great kauri tree. When something comes to be in a certain state, such as mature size, that state cannot bring itself into being. For until it comes to be it does not exist. And if it doesn't exist, it cannot cause anything. We know that the material world is a world of change. Everything's in a state of change. Doesn't matter what it is. You can point out anything you can. It all is in a state of change. Even if it appears as if it is not changing, it is moving, it's changing. Something's always breaking down or growing or something like that. Everything is in a state of change. The great Kauri tree, we know, grew from a small seed. Is still growing now. Or dying and therefore still in a state of change. When something comes to be in a certain state, and that could be a dead state or a live state or a small state or a large state or a moving state or something, but in this one they just said such as a mature size, so the Kauri tree in a mature size, that state of being that it is in, it cannot bring itself into being. Okay, a fully grown Kauri tree cannot bring itself just into being. Because until it comes to be, it does not exist. And if it doesn't exist, it cannot cause anything, cause an effect. Okay? How did this come about? What was the cause that brought this thing into its state? Okay, because it cannot make itself into that particular state. Until it comes to be, it does not exist. You have existence, to be, the verb to be, to exist. Until it comes to be, it does not exist. And if it does not exist, there's going to be nothing coming from it. Because it doesn't exist. Okay, so this is where we start. Abstract. So very abstract. But it should make sense if you plug any one thing into any of that. All right. As for the thing that changes, although it can be what it will become, the seed can become the tree, it is not yet what it will become. Obviously, it actually exists right now in this state. Such as a seed. it will actually exist in that state, all things being considered, a large kauri, but it is not actually in that state now. It has only potentiality for that state. We hold a kauri seed in our hand. We don't say this is a kauri tree, do we? We say this is a seed. It has the potential to be a kauri tree, but it is not a kauri tree. And there's no guarantee it's going to be a kauri tree because there needs to be some other factors involved. It just doesn't just grow. It needs other factors, and many of these factors are also subject to change. Weather, soil, conditions, people, all sorts of other things, and they're all subject to different types of change. Is that clear so far? We're going through the real basics, and the argument from change is a very good one because it starts from the bottom and then just starts to walk us through it a little bit. When you got that down, I will go to the next part. All got it written? Okay. So firstly, the question is, or a question is, how to explain the change, or to explain the change, we're talking about the change from potentiality to actuality. You all understand these terms? Something which is potential and something which is actual. To explain the change, other things must be involved. Okay, we agree with that. Nothing can give itself that which it does not have. You cannot give yourself money if you don't have money. And the changing thing cannot have now already what it will come to have then. The seed cannot have a branch. If it goes through its potentiality, if it goes through all that potentiality and reaches its actuality, it'll have a branch, or many. The result of change cannot actually exist before the change. Seem obvious? The changing thing begins with only the potential to change. But it needs to be acted on by other things outside. If that potential is to be made actual. Otherwise, it cannot change. But Father, that's logical. Yeah, I know. It's meant to be. Okay, that's that. That. Oh yeah, I'll write one more small paragraph. Nothing changes itself. Apparently self-moving things, which are therefore undergoing change. If you move, from anything that moves is undergoing change, change of place, change of speed, change of position. Like, for example, animal bodies, they move. Do they move by themselves? No, they are moved by desire or will, or some such thing, something other than mere molecules. And when the animal or human dies, the molecules remain. But the body no longer moves. Because the desire or will is no longer present to move it. That's just one example. Animal bodies. Okay, so St. Thomas, still, there's more to write still when you get this lot down. St. Thomas Aquinas is looking at the universe as a material universe that changes. He sees change constant. Every single thing changes. The changes themselves are not brought about by the thing itself. The change is always involving something else, which is bringing this about. And I suppose a lot of this is movement as well. You know, nothing moves unless it's been moved by another. Everybody got that down? Terry? Good? Okay. A further question. Are the other things outside the changing thing also changing? A weird way to phrase the question. Are its movers also moving? If so, think about it, we can just use our example, the seed turning into the tree. The seed's in change, it's constant. The seed needs other things in order for it to change. We can sit a seed on the table here and come back in 20 years' time, it's still going to be a seed, it's going to be pretty dried up, it's going to be a seed, it's still there. It hasn't had anything else to change it. No earth, no sunlight, no nitrogen, no nutrients, no water, nothing. Okay, it hasn't had anything else to change it. So, are the other things outside that changing thing, the seed, are they also changing? And are its movers, the thing which contributes to its change, are they also moving? And if they are moving, if so, all of them stand in need right now are being acted on by others. Okay, you understand what he's saying there? All these other factors that are involved in our seed changing, if they are standing in need of change, if they are also the movers, if they are being moved also, then they are standing in need of, right now, of being acted on by others, because they themselves can't move themselves. The water can't make itself fall and move. The sun can't keep itself unless it has its energy from somewhere. It's got to have energy from somewhere. Or everything stands, it looks like it stands, they all stand in need of something else moving them. Acting on by others. Or else they cannot change. So no matter how many things there are in the series, each one needs something outside itself. To actualize its potentiality for change. All right? The universe is the sum total of all these moving things. However many there are. The whole universe is in the process of change. But we have already seen that change in any being requires an outside force. To actualize it. Therefore, there is some force outside in addition to the universe. Some real being transcendent to the universe. This is one of the things meant by the word God. A transcendent being outside the universe and outside and not affected by the things within the universe. It stands for the outside and runs completely through them all. Thus transcendent. There's still a little bit more to come after this.
It did get there in the end, though.
Pardon?
It did get there in the end.
Yes. Just have to put out all the little statements that need to be there. So, are there things outside the changing thing also changing? Okay, so we've got our seed, the seed's changing. The other things that are outside of that seed, that do affect the seed, are its movers also moving? If so, then all of them stand in need right now of being acted on by others. Otherwise, how do they move? Or else they cannot change, so they themselves won't have the ability to move or change. No matter how many things there are in the series, and we could have a series of 5 things that result in, that result in a final thing that we see now, that when it's reached its actuality, that there were 5 things that got it there to move it there in order to get there. But each one of those things, whether it's 5 or 5 trillion, a long, long series of things involved all the way across the whole of the universe in order for something to work. Each and every one of those things, so no matter how many of there are in the series, each one needs something outside itself to actualize its potentiality for change. Potential and actuality. Okay? Something is in potential or something is its finality. So the universe, taken as all of created matter, is the sum total of all moving things. However many there are, trillions, quadrillions, the whole universe is in the process of change. The sun, for example, cannot just keep burning. It's impossible. It's got to run out of fuel. But we have already seen that change in any being requires an outside force. So the whole of the universe is in the process of change. We've seen that change in any being requires an outside force to actualize the change. Therefore, there is some force outside in addition to the universe. We're not talking about just on the exterior of the universe, which would make it part within the universe. But there is some force outside in addition to the universe. Some real being transcendent to the universe. This is one of the things meant by God. Okay? Questions? Wunderbar. Okay, I'll write that off. Is anybody out driving in the rain this morning or last night? Pretty fun, eh?
Lights coming at you, I can't see
Yeah.
the road.
I couldn't see it. I was driving down the motorway, I couldn't even see it.
Was everybody going really slow?
Not particularly.
Fun. All right, briefly. if there is nothing outside the material universe, then there is nothing that can cause other things to be. To begin to be, to continue to be, briefly, if there's nothing outside the material universe, then there is nothing that can cause the universe to change. If there's nothing outside the material universe, then there is nothing that can cause, and there is nothing that can cause, oh, sorry, the universe, oh, my mistake, I got the wrong line. So if there is nothing outside the material universe, then there is nothing that can cause the universe to change. Sorry. But it does change. But the universe is the sum total of all matter. Space and time. Okay, the phrase other universes is self-defeating. Because if it's the universe, it goes to the end of all created matter. You can't have the end of created matter and then just more matter after that, then that would be the universe. That would just part of created matter. So the universe is the sum total of all created matter, all space, all time. These three things depend on each other. Therefore, this being outside the universe is outside matter, space, and time. It is not a changing thing. It is the unchanging source of change. Okay, in order to take this in properly, You have to, in your own mind, you have to make the massive leap from a seed and a tree to the universe. Okay, because your mind has to take that in. We use the example of a thing in potentiality and a thing in actuality. Tree and seed. Seed is in potential, potentially going to be a tree, and then it can't just be a tree. It has to be acted on by other things for it to become from one state into another state. Those things that act upon it, the question is, are they themselves subject to change? Well, so what things act upon the seed to make it a tree? Water, light, nutrients, climate, human activity, time, space. All of these things are subject to change. Light is subject to change. There is, depending on where you are in the world, there is more or less light. Light is in itself moving. Okay, light is just not there. Light is not just something which is, you've got a sun, therefore you've got light. It moves. It moves from its source of brightness, where it comes and it keeps moving and it keeps changing. So light in and of itself is subject to change. Nutrients don't come in and of themselves. They come from other things, whether they are chemicals. They have all come from some other things in a breakdown and an evolution of certain things, but there is constant change in those. Water isn't a constant set, a constant change. Heating things up, drawing up evaporation from it, creating rain clouds, creating rain, wind moves that around, temperatures. There's a whole lot which is in it. So everything which affects the seed to become in its potentiality the kauri is in itself subject to change. So by extension, we mentioned 5 or 6 things which contribute to the growth of a tree. There's probably more like 100,000 things which contribute to the growth of a tree, okay, over a long period of time. That having been said, our number of things that are involved in change can go from 2 things to quadrillion. In other words, the whole of the universe is in a situation of constant flux and change. So what we were able to work out in the last lot that we had written up there is this action which is forcing this change or bringing about this change can't come from itself. Because those factors that we talked about, which affected just the seed to become the tree, they themselves need change. They themselves need something to move them also. And you can't go on into infinity because everything that has changed needs to have it given from somewhere else. So eventually we come to that conclusion that we said before. Change requires an outside force to actualize it. Something else. Therefore, there is some force outside in addition to the universe. Because the universe is all matter. All matter that exists everywhere is all in the state of change. Something outside of all matter must be the thing which is behind it. And if it's outside all matter, then it in itself is not subject to change. Because it is above matter. And matter requires space and time. As it continues to move through time, it requires a thing called time, a thing called the matter itself. And therefore, this thing that is first making this change, it is outside matter, time and space. Which brings us to this. Okay? If there is nothing outside the material universe, then there is nothing that can cause the universe to change. But the universe does change. The universe is the sum total of all matter, time and space. These 3 things depend on each other, but they can't be the source of each other. Therefore, this being outside the universe is outside matter, space and time. It is not a changing thing. It is the unchanging source of change. Remember, this is our first argument for the existence of God. It's just the argument from change. The fact that things change we conclude there's something outside changing things, or outside all matter. There's got to be something which is moving and changing these things. Good?
So even on micro or macro level, the self-sufficiency is such a fallacy for everything.
Oh, totally.
God.
Totally. We have no self-sufficiency. I mean, scientists have tried for a long, long time to find the continually moving thing that just moves in and of itself. Perpetual motion. Okay, and they make tricks. There are certain tricks that something can have what seemingly is perpetual motion, but we're not being able to do it because it has to be moved from something else. Yeah, so as you said, on the macro level, the micro level, as you look right down and think, everything's in change. Scientists will tell you the same thing, it's all in change. Stone itself is in change. There was a time it was not like it is now, and there's a time that it will not be like it is now as it starts to change, as the earth itself, a physical piece of matter, is in constant change. Rupay, who's bubbling, by the way.
It's pretty crazy when you start thinking about change like that, because if, for instance, you take a child, it isn't, you don't look at a baby and be like, that's an adult. The factors that need to go into that child becoming a baby, becoming a child, becoming an adult. And then if you say, like, look on the real, like, down to what that body needs, so like the heart, the lungs, the stomach, all these things, and then the change that needs to take place, and the outside influences that need to be input.
See,
you can just go on and on and
how
on.
Much? And what about the child that you hold in your arms after it's born? How much use of reason does it have? Potentially.
More than we think.
Exactly, potentially. We all have potential for greater use of reason. And we're still in that potential, which will only ever be fulfilled in its actuality in possessing that which is our final end. Because otherwise we're always learning. We don't know, we can't know everything while still in this mortal coil, because we don't have that limitlessness. We are very limited, even in the intellectual mode. Okay, so it's all subject to change. As the child grows, the child becomes more and more able to use reason. Okay, but even then we start to wonder about that when you see 50 and 60-year-old adults murdering someone. How much reason are they using? Very poor reason. Okay, so it keeps going on. It's always in. It's a good example. A human being undergoes so much change. 8 o'clock. We will go to our second argument soon. Let's take a quick rest. The second argument is the argument from efficient causality. Good, good. And we have 20 of these arguments for the existence of God.
The clock is out of battery. I will bring some battery tomorrow.
Your cough's not too bad. Your cough isn't too bad.
Oh, most of these are St. Louis coffee. It's good. If I talk too much,
Efficient causality.
fine.
everything was. That's right, change.
Yeah, it says it's removed from the outside. And that is coming through program. All that information's coming from chromosomes. All that micro.
It's not going.
But that's what we program by.
So how was COVID? Was it fun?
It was an average flu.
Right.
It didn't give me bronchitis. So it was definitely manageable.
How many days were you under some effect from it?
I'm not sure, 10 maximum, but
Okay.
really, I only really acknowledged it sort of about a week in,
Okay.
which is when my glands came up. So it was when I had a test. And
Yeah.
the officials take that as being day zero.
Okay.
So which is why I'm better wait a fortnight.
Fair enough.
But I normally get bad chest infections and I didn't this time.
Okay.
So that's what I'm saying, it's
Yeah.
rare.
I don't know what percentage of our parishioners have had it now. I'm guessing between 30 and 50, maybe more. I don't know.
And some will have had fairly mild symptoms.
Yes. Some of them are 2 or 3 days. Mostly the unvaccinated had symptoms for 2 or 3 days. The vaccinated, at least for the ones who've told me, have had symptoms for 5 to 10 days.
It's quite severe.
Some of them, but not all. It just seems odd. The vaccinated having worse symptoms than the unvaccinated.
Apparently not able to have such big fevers.
Oh, I don't know. I haven't been asking them all. Yes. I was speaking to one of our priests in America today. He got vaccinated, and then about a day after he got vaccinated, he tested positive for COVID. Yeah. Or was it the other way around? Yeah, I think he got vaccinated first, and then he tested positive for COVID the next day. Anyway, it seems to be working its way through the country pretty quickly. All right, we have the argument from efficient causality. All right. So, we notice that some things cause other things to be. So that means to begin, to be, to continue, just write that one, continue, to be, or both. For example, a man playing the piano is causing the music we hear. If he stops, so does music. All right, so question. Are all these things, are all things, not these, are all things caused to exist by other things? Right now. Suppose they are. That is, id est. Suppose there is no uncaused being. No God, in other words. Then nothing could exist right now. Remember, on the no God hypothesis, all things need a present cause. Outside of themselves. In order to exist. So right now, all things including all those things which are causing others, are causing other things to be, need a cause. They can give being only so long as they are given being. Everything that exists therefore this hypothesis stands in need of being caused to exist. We notice that some things cause other things to be. Sometimes they cause it to be, sometimes they cause it to continue to be, or sometimes both continue to be and cause it to continue. For example, a man playing the piano is causing the music we hear. If he stops, so does the music. So, question, are all things caused to exist by other things right now? Okay? Everything that exists, is it caused by something else right now? Suppose they are. That is, suppose there is no uncaused being. Then nothing could exist right now. Remember, on the no God hypothesis, all things need a present cause. That means right now, outside of themselves, in order to exist. So right now, all things, including all those things which are causing other things to be, they also need a cause right now. They can give being only so long as they themselves are given being. Everything that exists, therefore, on this hypothesis stands in need of being caused. Stands in need of being caused. Okay, it stands in need of being, which is caused to exist. So everything that exists right now has a need in something else, but they themselves, in order to exist, have to need a being that is causing them to exist. So if we have just this reliance, this idea, this thing is existing, it's existing because this other thing has caused it to be a child. It comes about because of two adults, okay? And therefore they continue to keep it going as well. But that child, in and of itself, suppose there is no uncaused being, then nothing could exist right now. This is what we would say, because on the no God hypothesis, everything needs a present cause outside of themselves in order to exist. So all things, including the things which are causing the other thing, so even the parents, they also need cause. They can give being only so long as they are given being by something else. Everything that exists, therefore, on this hypothesis stands in need of being caused to exist. All being has to have this cause behind it. It's impossible in terms of this idea of cause and effect that something can just exist by itself. Especially right now. Even if everything would just go across all things, even the ones that are the causes, well then how are they existing? Because they themselves, right now, have got something that brought them into existence. This will continue. We still have 15 minutes. Because the question is, but caused by what? Obviously. Okay, we'll get that down. But caused by what? Beyond everything that is. There can only be nothing. Same as we had in the last argument. Nada. Nothing. But that is absurd. All of reality dependent. But dependent on nothing. Okay, we were asking that question just before as I put up that last sheet up on the page, that everything that has a cause seems to have need cause itself in order for it to exist. Okay, fair enough. So what is it caused by? What's the cause? Beyond everything that is, the universe, there can only be nothing. Here's your matter. Here's all things that have been caused to exist. Beyond that was nothing. Because everything's caused to exist exists in time and space and place. There it is, universe. Outside that, there's only nothing. But that's absurd. All of reality is dependent. What do we mean by dependent? That it's got some other cause to it. It came about by a cause. But if there's nothing outside, its cause is nothing. Can something come from nothing? By itself. I'd like to see that in my bank account. Be good, wouldn't it? Build our own church by having nothing. You've got nothing in your account. Oh, we have a lot. It's just happened by itself. The hypothesis. That all being is caused that there is no uncaused being is absurd. So there must be something uncaused. Something on which all things that need an efficient cause of being are dependent. Stands to reason. We're working on reason here. All right. Existence is like a gift. Given from cause to effect. If there is no one who has the gift, the gift cannot be passed down. chain of receivers. However long or short the chain may be. If everyone has to borrow a certain book, but no one actually has it, then no one will ever get it. If there is no God who has existence, by his own eternal nature, then the gift of existence cannot be passed down the chain of creatures. And we can never get it. But we do get it. We exist. Therefore, there must exist a God. An uncaused being. Who does not have to receive existence. Like us. And like every other link. In the chain of receivers. Here we go. the existence of God from causality. Okay? Efficient causality. Existence is like a gift, okay, but caused by what? Beyond everything that is, there can only be nothing. But that is absurd if there's nothing beyond everything exists. If everything that exists needs some other thing to cause it, and then beyond everything that exists there is absolutely nothing, then therefore all these things were dependent on nothing. They can't just keep depending constantly on each other for their existence. Something eventually has to come from outside of them to give that existence to begin with. Beyond everything that is, there can only be nothing, but that is absurd. All of reality would be dependent. Okay, we recognise the idea, the meaning of the word dependent, therefore would come about by some other cause. But if it was dependent on nothing, which is outside of existence itself, then that is absurdity. The hypothesis that all being is caused, that there is no uncaused being, is therefore absurd. So there must be something uncaused, something on which all things that need an efficient cause of being are dependent. There must be something which is uncaused. Existence is like a gift, and this is a very good analogy, given from cause to effect. If there is no one who has the gift, then the gift cannot be passed down the chain of receivers, however long or short the chain may be. If everyone has to borrow a certain book, but no one actually has it, then no one will ever get the book. Obvious. If there is no God who has existence by his own eternal nature, therefore uncaused, that he himself is existence, then the gift of existence cannot be passed down the chain of creatures, and we can never get it, and therefore we would never exist. But we do get it because we exist. So existence has to come from one who has existence in itself. Okay? Therefore there must exist a God, an uncaused being who does not have to receive existence like us and like every other link in the chain of receivers. That is the argument from efficient causality. Questions on that? So far so good. See, Thomas Aquinas is really hard to get around. I mean, they're similar, aren't they? The first one, the argument from change, and the argument from efficient causality, they're similar, but he goes through the steps of them to show that they are different, but they eventually end up with the same type of autotype logic. And this is 2 of his 5. He's got some questions, which are quite good actually. Why do we need an uncaused cause? Why could there not simply be an endless series of things mutually keeping each other in being? That's what people sort of think. Well, surely it's just existence has kept going forever, and they just keep each other going and going and going and going. So it brings us to our argument. Things have got to exist in order to be mutually dependent. So something has to exist in order that it is mutually dependent on something else. They cannot depend upon each other for their entire being, because that would have to be simultaneously cause and effect of each other. So that would be similar, like A causes B, B causes C, C causes A. Can't work, can it? If A causes B, B causes C, and C causes A, then A causes B, B causes C, and C causes A, and C causes A, and A. So there's a circular existence to which can't exist because we have a timeline of existence in and of itself. So the idea that something has always existed, well then, existence has to come from something. It can't come from nothing. So the idea that it's just existence is in and of itself there, but it's not its own cause, is not science. It doesn't work that way. Science doesn't work that way. It's got to have something that brings it first of all. Okay, so it doesn't really make sense in a scientific manner. The argument is trying to show why a world of caused causes can be given or can be there at all. And it simply points out, if this thing can exist only because something else is giving it existence, then there must exist something whose being is not a gift. Otherwise, everything would need at the same time to be giving, being, but nothing in addition to everything, could exist to give it, and that means nothing would actually be. It is, if I wrote that one out, so that one's really sort of, oh, hang on, what? I can put it up probably next week if you want me to, as we go into that question. But this is this whole idea, perpetual existence, like perpetual motion just doesn't exist. Perpetual existence can't exist. It falls upon itself as a very bad scientific argument. But anyway, that's plenty for tonight. Not too difficult. The argument from change and the argument from efficient causality. A few new words in there, but it shows itself out to be pretty clear. We've got 3 more St. Thomas reasons for the existence of God to come. Okay, let's pray. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and shall be, world without end. Amen.
Glory be to the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and shall be, world without end. Amen.
Glory be to the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and shall be, world without end. Amen.
Benedictio Dei omnipotentis Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sanctus, et super vos, mania semper. Thank you.